Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. In a strange turn of events, this is actually a 6-player game, and you'll see why as the game goes on. But to start us off, we have Matt playing his Ezuri deck with 3 forests, an island, Gyre Sage, Overwhelming Stampede, and Croson Grip. Sean is playing his Dragon deck, and he keeps a hand with Shivan Reef, Underground River, Reflecting Pool, Bloodstained Mire, Sylvan Library, Conspiracy, and Heroic Intervention. Trevor is playing his Yidris deck, and keeps a hand with Commander Sphere, Sunken Hollow, Temple of Abandon, Polluted Delta, Cinderglade, Necrologia, and Hero's Downfall. Lastly, Mike is playing Dromar, and keeps a hand with Plains, Swamp, Command Tower, Prairie Stream, Underground River, Overseer of the Damned, and Divinity of Pride. Also, this game starts off a little bit differently. Because Trevor whooped everyone so handily the game before this, the guys at the table decided that rather than to roll for it, Trevor has to go last. And as Mike is sitting across from him, Mike is very happy with this arrangement because he gets to go first. Mike plays a Plains and passes turn. Sean plays a Bloodstained Mire, cracking it to find a land and passes. Matt plays a Thornwood Falls, which comes into play tapped and gives him 1 life. Trevor plays Temple of Abandon and scries. He bottoms the top card and passes. Mike plays a Swamp and passes turn. Sean plays a Reflecting Pool and casts a Sylvan Library. Matt plays a Forest and passes. Trevor plays a Wooded Foothills, taking 1 to crack it and go find a land. With nothing else, he passes turn. Mike plays a Prairie Streams, which comes into play untapped because of his basics, and passes turn. Sean activates his library on his turn, but only keeps 1 card. He then plays and cracks the Verdant Catacombs he kept, and passes. Matt plays an island, and pays 2 to cast Gyre Sage before passing to Trevor. Trevor plays a Polluted Delta, and also cracks it, and announces he'll be finding a shock, so he bolts himself. He then casts Commander Sphere to save some time, and passes while searching. Mike plays a Command Tower, and taps 3 mana to cast a Coalition Relic. Sean activates his library again, but this time takes the full 8 to keep the 3 cards. He then plays a Tundra, and casts Silumgar's Monument. Matt plays a Forest and casts Ezuri. This triggers the Gyre Sage's Evolve ability, and Matt puts a counter on it. Matt then taps the Gyre Sage to cast Wirewood Symbiote and gains an experience counter. Matt then moves to combat and puts the +1/+1 counter onto his Gyre Sage before passing to Trevor. Trevor plays a Reliquary Tower for his land for turn and moves to his end step. He casts Necrologia and pays 10 life, drawing 10 cards, and then passes to Mike. At the end of Trevor's turn, Mike puts a charge counter, or whatever it's called, on the relic and starts his turn. Mike removes the counter on his relic in his first main phase for a white mana, and then plays a Swamp. He pays 5 mana to cast Divinity of Pride, and passes turn. Sean does his library trigger, but only keeps 1 this time. He plays a Mountain, and casts some Boros Key Ruin before passing to Matt. Matt plays a Kalani Gardens as his land for turn, creating a 0/1 plant token as the land comes into play tapped. This gives him another experience counter for Ezuri. Matt then casts Elvish Promenade, gaining 2 elf tokens and 2 more experience counters, and Trevor gives the viewers a bit of what everyone wants. Moving to combat, Matt puts 4 +1/+1 counters on one of his elves and passes turn. Trevor casts Propaganda in his main phase to deter all of these growing creatures away from himself. He then plays Temple of Epiphany and scries. He keeps the card on top. Trevor then passes turn, and Mike puts a counter on the relic once more. Mike removes the counter in his main phase, naming blue, and plays an Underground River. He then uses 2 lands in his floating mana to cast Cackling Counterpart on his Divinity because 2 is better than 1. Moving to combat, Mike swings the original Divinity at Matt for 8 and gains 8 life. I sub in for Sean at this point as he's busy dealing with a customer. I have no idea what I'm trying to do with this deck, which I guess isn't much different from any time that I'm playing my own decks. I keep 1 card from the library trigger, and I play a Shivan Reef before passing turn. Matt plays a Forest and casts Lightning Greaves. He puts the Greaves onto Ezuri and moves to combat. He gets the Ezuri trigger and puts the counters on Gyre Sage. Not wanting to put a target on himself any more than he does by having tons of mana, Matt passes turn rather than attack. Trevor plays an island for his turn and casts Farseek. He goes to find a land and passes turn. In a bold statement, Mike decides not to put a counter on his relic. Mike, on his turn, instantly regrets that decision, but decides to play a Plains to help cover his pain. Mike then moves to combat and shares his pain with Matt and myself/Sean by sending Divinity at each of us. I animate the Silumgar's Monument and block the Divinity, and Matt takes 8 and Mike gains 16. In his second main phase, Mike casts Hallowed Burial to put all creatures on the bottom of their respective owners' libraries. Matt responds by activating his Symbiote, bouncing the Gyre Sage back to his hand. I use Sean's library trigger once again, and am confused by what I see. I draw 1 and play Cave of Koilos. I then cast a Dimir Key Ruin and cast a Tarka World Render before passing to Matt. Matt recasts Ezuri in his main phase and gears him up with the Greaves. He then moves to combat as soon as the Greaves are on Ezuri and hits Mike for 3 commander damage. At the end of Matt's turn, Trevor delves away his graveyard to cast Dig Through Time. Trevor plays a forest for his turn and casts Mirage Mirror. Trevor then casts Saheeli's Artistry, targeting his mirror and Sean's Atarka. At the end of his turn, Mike puts a charge counter onto his relic. Mike removes his counter in his main phase and uses it to help pay for his Overseer of the Damned. He targets my Atarka and gets a zombie token when Atarka dies. Sean then swaps back in for me when Mike passes turn. Sean uses his library trigger and then plays Llanowar Wastes, passing and getting up to help another customer. Matt plays a forest and casts Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. He upticks her to make a plant token and gains another experience counter. Matt then recasts Gyre Sage and gains another experience counter. He passes through his steps, putting the counters on the Gyre Sage, and then equipping the Greaves onto the Sage in his second main phase. Trevor plays a Cinder Glade for his land for turn and casts Volcanic Visions. He targets Dig Through Time and is set to deal 8 damage to all of his opponent's creatures. Mike does get some zombie tokens as the Overseer sees things dying as it dies. Moving to combat, Trevor swings his token copy of Atarka at Mike for 12. Mike puts a charge counter on the relic at the end of turn and starts his own turn. Mike removes the counter on his relic in his main phase, and this time Harry subs in for Sean. Mike then casts a Desecration Demon in his main phase and casts Solemn Simulacrum. He grabs a basic and then plays New Benalia, scrying 1 and bottoming it. At the end of Mike's turn, Harry activates both of the key ruins to psych people out. Harry keeps 1 card from the library trigger and plays a Mountain. He then casts Prosh, Skyreader of Care, and we make a slight mistake thinking he gets 6 kobolds. He passes turn. Matt draws for turn and upticks Nissa. Harry catches his mistake at this point and untaps a land and loses one of the kobolds. On Trevor's turn, he casts Blatant Thievery in his main phase, targeting Desecration Demon, Prosh, and Nissa. With the spell in the stack, Harry casts Sean's copy of Heroic Intervention. As a result, Trevor only ends up with Nissa and the Demon, which isn't half bad. Trevor then upticks Nissa to get a Blant token and moves to combat. Trevor swings the Atarka at Mike for 12 once more, and at the end of turn, Mike puts a counter on the relic. Mike removes his counter, naming Blue, and casts Stunt Double in his main phase to copy Trevor's copied Atarka. He then passes to Harry. Harry uses the library on Sean's turn and takes 4 to keep an extra card. He plays an Arid Mesa and cracks it, taking 1 to go and find Taiga. Harry then casts Rishkar's Expertise and draws 5 cards. He then gets to cast Conspiracy for free and names dragons as it comes into play for obvious reasons. Harry then casts Elemental Bond and passes turn. Matt casts Growing Right of Itlimoc in his main phase and keeps Collar of the Claw from the cards he looks at. He then passes turn. Trevor untaps and makes sure everything is on the up and up before drawing for his turn. He plays a forest and upticks Nissa to get another plant token. He then casts Ranger's Path to find 2 forests, which he'll do after. He moves to combat, and Mike sacrifices his Solemn Simulacrum to the Desecration Demon trigger, tapping it and gets to draw a card. Trevor then decides to swing Atarka at Mike, and Mike blocks it with his Atarka. But because Trevor's Atarka gets double strike for attacking, Mike's dies and he still takes 8 from the trample damage. With combat over, Trevor passes turn and goes to find his 2 forest cards. Mike puts a counter onto the relic and starts his turn. He removes the counter in his main phase and calls white. He then casts Wrath of God, to which Harry responds to by casting Boros Charm to make his stuff indestructible while the spell's on the stack. Matt has no response, but Trevor doesn't want to lose his board, so he casts Desertion to counter the Wrath. Mike then casts Dromar and passes turn. Harry plays a Polluted Delta and cracks it to go and find Blood Crypt. Harry then drops Craterhoof Behemoth, who is also a dragon in addition to his other types, not that this has much of an impact on the game at all. With the spell in the stack, Matt decides he wants to help open up who Harry can attack, and in an attempt to direct it away from himself, uses Krosan Grip to take out Trevor's propaganda. Harry then layers his triggers so that he draws before the Craterhoof trigger, and with the trigger still in the stack, Harry animates the Boros Key Ruin. All of Harry's creatures then get +8/+8 in trample, not to mention the double strike that the Key Ruin has. Moving to combat, Harry swings the Key Ruin and 3 kobolds at Trevor, and 2 kobolds, Prosh, and the Craterhoof Behemoth at Mike. Mike declares he's blocking with everything he can, while Trevor responds to the declared blocker step and casts Hero's Downfall to kill the Key Ruin. Trevor then takes 24 damage, and even with the blockers, Mike unfortunately dies. With nothing else, Harry passes turn. Matt plays a Nykthos, and we realize that Trevor will no longer have the Desecration Demon because Mike is no longer in the game. Matt then casts Collar of the Claw, and casts Overwhelming Stampede, giving all of his creatures +2/+2 and trample. Now Matt is in an awkward position, wherein he has to decide who he wants to die to. Either he helps Trevor kill Harry, but then might die to Trevor afterwards, or do the same, but helps Harry. It's not great in any case, but Trevor says he'll uphold the Xenobro agreement and not attack him if Matt lets him attack and possibly kill Harry. Matt agrees, and hits Harry for 6. Trevor draws for turn, and ultimates Nissa, gaining 13 life and drawing 13 cards. Trevor then casts Dax Duplicant, and with the spell in the stack, Harry sacrifices the Craterhoof to Prosh. Trevor, oddly enough, has it come into play as a copy of the plant token. He then activates his Mirage Mirror as a copy of Prosh, and Harry realizes he could have actually killed Trevor had he animated the Dimir Key Rune and given all of his creatures a further +1/+1 on the Craterhoof turn. Trevor then casts Sepultural Primordial, grabbing the Craterhoof, and upholding the Xenobro code, swings only at Sean/Harry to take him out of the game. Matt recasts Ezuri for his turn, and puts the boots onto his commander. Moving to combat, he puts the counters on his plant, and swings everything at Trevor. Trevor untaps for his turn, and having set out to do what he wanted to do this game, which is to kill Harry/Sean, pays 3 mana and casts Toxic Deluge, and pays 4 life to end the game by dying to his own spell. Game review time. So I really didn't see that win coming. I think Matt played it a bit too cautiously this game, as he had a pretty big Gyre Sage and the Overwhelming Stampede in his hand since the get-go. He could have swung and done a lot of damage, but I guess he wanted to hold it back because he didn't want to become the arch enemy of the game. Mike, on the other hand, had no problem going full tilt with Divinity of Pride, and then a second one, smashing into people, gaining a ton of life, and just being an all-around flying nuisance. He did say after the game though that he thinks his Hallowed Burial was probably a mistake, and he could have afforded to keep it in his hand for a bit longer. Trevor's Yidris deck showed once again that he's able to play with your deck almost better than you are, and running only clone spells and steal spells can result in some interesting games, as it'll change based on who you're facing. I think this game is a testament to Harry's skill as a Magic player, as he pretty much walked into the store, sat down to this game with no prior knowledge, and almost won the game. It didn't hurt that Sean had built a really sweet Ur-Dragon deck, but Harry was able to pilot it really well. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.